Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. Today's episode of In the Frame focuses on Robert Downey Sr. You've probably heard of his son. This is Robert Downey Sr. and I'm going to focus on the 5 films that are in the Criterion Eclipse DVD set. This is set 33, Up All Night with Robert Downey Sr. Now, Robert Downey Sr. Was one of the underground filmmakers in New York in the late 50s and 60s. There's also an influence of the nouvelle vague in his work. His films are experimental and scattershot, pretty much shot in 16mm, a few of them. His most famous one, which we'll get to, there's a rumour that might be coming to Indicator on Blu-ray at some point. So it's 5 films. We have Babo or Babo 73, Chafed Elbows, No More Excuses, Putney Swope or Putney Swope, which is his most famous one, and 2 Tons of Turquoise to Taos Tonight, which is a lovely title. This Eclipse set is with purple and pink, which is a lovely mix. This is Babo 73, Chafed Elbows and No More Excuses. And some of the clips have like kind of an essay in the inside cover. This set does have a booklet with details of the films. So it has 3 films, and the other disc has Putney Swope and 2 Tons of Turquoise to Taos Tonight. And again, this one just has a booklet as well with the disc. I would say because these are not on great prints, they're 16mm, Criterion have done the best they can as far as the prints are concerned. But just the kind of rough and ready nature of the films kind of go with the subject matter. So I'm not going to spend too much time on each film. To me, there's 2 out of the 5 films that are really kind of worth your time, you know, if you're into the history of the New York underground scene, or if you like your films a little bit off the wall. These are definitely of a certain time. I think the French New Wave has survived the test of time for the most part. I'm not really sure the Robert Downey Sr. films have survived the test of time as much. Obviously Cassavetes was in that kind of group as well. There are racist language in the films, there's homophobic slurs in the films, there is just a certain aesthetic and a certain time. I mean, these films are satirical, they're not racist films and they're not homophobic films, they are satirical, they are in your face, they're meant to be transgressive, they're meant to get a reaction, they're meant to be provocative. So we'll start with Babo or Babo 73, which is about a man who's the president of the United Status, not States, the United Status, and he has a left-wing advisor and a right-wing advisor, and a private secretary, and they have meetings not in the White House, on the beach or on the street. with the exception of Putney Swope, most of these films are under an hour, which is good because there's a couple of them that probably any longer than that would become quite annoying. Again, this is a kind of bizarre video for me because I'm not saying, rush out and buy this set, because it's not for everybody. I would recommend, like I say, I'm going to tell you which couple of films I would at least recommend you checking out, but again, if you're in a certain mood, then these films will possibly appeal to you depending on your sensibilities and your sense of humour. So there's, in Babel 73, there's obviously lots of points in all these films about capitalism and the state of America in the 60s, race relations, drugs, crime. There's so many kind of one-liners that are absolutely wonderful, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of, like I say, hasn't aged that well, but there's certainly a lot of fun to be had from it. The next film is Chafed Elbows, which I think is one of the more interesting films in the set. Again, this follows a character who we're introduced to who has a sexual relationship with his mother, and he goes to the analyst. There's a wonderful scene where he gets initials painted on him as he's walking down the street, and this guy is an artist, so he tells him, you have to go to an art gallery and you'll sit there because you're now one of my paintings, and once you're sold you're on your own, or I might take you for my own collection at home where I have wife in kitchen and child in the living room. There's a lot of kind of surrealism, there's a lot of absurdity, absurdist humour, and again there's a lot of rapid fire one-liners. All the female characters in quite a lot of these films are played by Elsie Downey, who was Robert Downey Jr.'s wife at the time, and she plays a myriad of roles, from the main character's mother to junkies and just lots of different roles. The main character ends up in an underground film of his own. Again, throughout these films is, Downey is almost criticising the underground scene while he's actually making underground films. So again, plots are kind of ethereal things in these films. Narrative structure isn't really a concern. Certainly a film we'll get to in a little bit. Narrative structure or storytelling is really just out the window. These are experimental, these are just scattershot provocations, essentially. The next one is No More Excuses, which I think is one of the best ones. I think this is probably one that I would say you should check out just as an example of Downey's work. This attacks on about 5 different fronts, so I'll try and explain what the hell's going on. It opens with Civil War or war footage. It recounts the story of a Civil War soldier who was shot in the ass, played dead for 16 hours, then made his way home. But he, for some reason, is transported to modern day New York. He trips over a couple of gay guys in the park, and that's his introduction to the modern world. So we have, it cuts between him wandering through the modern world. It also cuts between, again, a Civil War period of 3 attempts to assassinate a president. It then cuts in between a spokesman for SINA, SINA, which is a campaign to clothe naked animals, your cats and your dogs and your cows, to put trousers on them and put clothes on them, because it's terrible having animals being naked, especially around the house. It's against morality and decency. There's a wonderful campaign song that the spokesman sings at some point during the film as well. It's then cut between a man who's trying to break into a house and sexually assault a woman. It also intercuts between real interviews involving people who are involved in the singles bar scene in New York. So it's basically about singles bars, but it's intercut with the Civil War soldier, the assassination attempts, the sexual assault, almost, pretty much, and these interviews asking people why they go to singles bars. But altogether, all of that mixed up and intercut, it does actually make some kind of sense about relationships and sex in 60s New York. And then it turns out at the end of the film, the two people who are kind of involved in that sexual assault, who obviously in those days sexual assault in cinema wasn't taken perhaps as seriously as it would now, so they end up in bed together, and the interviewer turns out to be a chimp who joins them in bed. So the whole package is certainly interesting, and I think it's one of the ones that work the best, even though I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who'd be offended about what's in it, and again, to me, that's part of what Downey was doing in his films. Again, these films, I think, are provocations as well as satires. They're not meant to be taken too seriously or too literally, but we all know people do tend to take things seriously and literally sometimes. And then we have Putney Swope, which is the feature length, essentially, about 85 minutes. And this is his most famous film. And again, this is the one that's been rumoured to get a release on Indicator Blu-ray. I don't know how true that rumour is. And again, this is a wonderful satire, but if you watch all the other films first and then watch Putney Swope, you kind of understand how it's constructed. It's probably the most narratively strong film. We open with this advertising company who's going through trouble, and the chief executive dies, so they vote for the next chairman, the next chief executive, who turns out to be the only African American on the board. Putney Swope, that's why it's the title of the film. And it turns out the rest of the board members vote for him, but only because individually they voted for him because they didn't think anybody else would vote for him. And it turns out that 9 out of the 11 actually vote for him. And he immediately changes the company by getting rid of all the white people and employing black people in all the positions, and the advertising company changes. Again, it's really funny. There's a lot of familiar faces. Anthony Fargus, who would later obviously be Antonio Fargus, turns up. There's a fleeting appearance by Mel Brooks. There's a fleeting appearance by Bennings from The Thing as a chauffeur. So before he went to Antarctica, he was a chauffeur. This is the one that, like I say, it's more narrative driven. It's not as scattershot or in your face from an editing point of view. It is a wonderful film. It's still problematic, but for me, along with No More Excuses, it's the one that works the best. The ads that are produced by the company, they're in colour. The rest of the film is in black and white. There's a wonderful one about pimple cream, and again, it's just about how power corrupts, money corrupts. The final images of the film are absolutely wonderful and kind of almost a statement on Downey's entire catalogue, certainly of the 5 films that I've seen. So Putney Swope and No More Excuses for me are the two that you should kind of give a go, and if you like, you'd maybe watch the other ones, but again, it's one of those groups of films that I wouldn't have a problem if everybody, said they're not for me and they're not very good, because if I'm in a different mood, then I might think of them a little bit differently. And then the last film is 2 Tons of Turquoise to Taos Tonight, which this is the one that is completely no storytelling, no narrative structure. It's literally small sketches all thrown together. For me, this is the weakest because there is no anchor. It is just completely free form. There's still a lot of wonderful lines in it. Like a character says to another character, I have a brain tumour, and then there's a long pause between the two of them, and the other character says, it's all in your head. There's baseball on horseback. There's just so much stuff. I'm not going to attempt to detail the things that are in the film. Again, it is probably, maybe all of these films are best watched late at night. But for me, 2 Tons of Turquoise to Taos Tonight, just by its very nature, for me at least, is probably the weakest of the films by far, and it's probably not something that I would rewatch at any point. It will be interesting if Indicator do release Putney Swope, whether any of these will be on the Blu-ray as extras. That'd be quite interesting to see, because like I said, the other ones are under an hour. But yeah, it's, again, like I say, it's not a set that I would say rush out and buy, which is unusual for the videos that I do, because I usually do say go and buy this. Again, I don't know whether these are on the Criterion channel, if you can watch the Criterion channel, but they're certainly well worth a look. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if you comment that you really don't like them. I mean, like I say, if I was in a different mood, maybe I might think of them a little bit differently. Again, I don't think any of these are amazing films, but I think there's enough in them, or parts of them, that are interesting and worth a look, especially the 2 that I kind of mentioned more, like No More Excuses and Putney Swope. But Chafed Elbows has a lot of good stuff in it, a lot of transgressive stuff, which again, I think it's to provoke the audience was part of that underground scene, because it's as far away from the 50s melodramas as you can possibly get. It's kind of guerrilla filmmaking, and it is just a new style, like I said, fairly influenced by the Nouvelle Vague for sure, but well worth a look if you're kind of, like I said, if you're interested in the history of the American underground cinema, specifically in New York. Yeah, you can let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these Robert Downey Sr. films, or any other Robert Downey Sr. films. and which ones are your favourite. And hopefully you'll join me again for more In the Frame episodes. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying cheerio.